DJ with a simulcast of the fireworks, so people can sit in their cars or they can sit on a blanket, but they're spread out all over the park.
So no Joe Nichols this
Hey,
year.
Chuck.
So we didn't sign the contract with Joe Nichols. We're probably not going to,
Okay,
because
so we're trying to come up with something fun,
yeah,
but it's also different.
most of the region are canceling their event. We wanted to keep it.
Okay.
So we thought about actually asking the fireworks company to do more.
Ask
Very
who?
cool.
Ask who?
Fireworks.
Fireworks community,
Wait, let me-
last year we spent 10,000, we're looking at what we can get for 15.
That is super
Great
cute.
idea.
Yes.
We're talking about selling those.
We need some
for car
girl
show.
ones. You know what I
Oh,
mean?
that looks good. Where'd you get that?
If there's one in your box. in your
It is
box.
there.
I haven't looked yet either.
Mine's probably got cobwebs on it for so long as
Yeah.
it's been.
I think we're gonna sell
Super
them for car
cute.
show for like $5.
Nice.
Can I trade this up a size?
Yeah.
That's not allowed.
The coronavirus. Add in.
Thank you. Yeah, me too.
have something for you. Cute, Ronnie.
Did Callie
Yeah, you're not kidding. I tried on.
say how long it's going to take for,
Crossing fingers. I was like, okay, that
you
works.
talked to Callie?
Yeah.
I talked to her earlier today.
She said she
Yep.
was on her way over to the office.
Okay, you know how long it'll take for her to get there?
No, I think you probably should start.
Yeah, Yuki's not gonna have any night shifts.
Enjoying.
after off city
Okay.
council.
Oh, there she
Oh, there
is.
she is.
Callie's here.
Whoa.
Sorry, lost power at home, guys.
Yeah, well, great. You're quicker than I thought you would be. Super.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
stuck came out to the office where they're showering.
Okay. Then we're all here. You set up, Callie? You ready to start?
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay,
We're
then
on.
Oh, thank you, Jerry. This is very helpful.
I'm going to call the work session to order for May 19th, 2020 at 5:30. So we're now in session. Let me call the roll. Councilmember Nakamura,
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Linda Mood,
Here.
Councilmember Wheat,
Here.
the mayor's here, Councilmember Dodson,
Here.
Councilmember Kelly,
Here.
Councilmember Rigney.
Here.
Very good. Okay, so it should be obvious to anyone that's watching this on TV, but again, we're having our work session in the council chambers because we still, Councilmember Dodson and Councilmember Rigney are coming in through WebEx, so they're not on site, but we can see them and hear them, and so they're going to participate just like everyone else will. We have 3 items on, oh, and you can see we're all physically distanced appropriately, and if you, the city hall is open tonight, so if you want to come into the meeting later, that starts at 7:30. Right after this work session, we'll have executive session, and then the regular meeting starts at 7:30. There are places for you to sit. There's also a computer in the lobby that if you wanted to come into the lobby and see us via WebEx, you can interact with us via that mechanism too. So with that, we'll start our work session. We have 3 items. The first item is discussion of the stormwater CIP plan. So Ray?
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Ray Silvarez, Director of Public Works. If you remember, back in February, we did a kind of a summary of all the stormwater master plans that we've done up to date. And we showed you all the projects that were involved and the total cost of what it would take to kind of get those projects going. So what we plan to do here today is to give you a quick recap on that meeting and then let you see the different outbreaks of all those projects in a 10-year window span with different budgets assigned to each one of them. And then just kind of go over those numbers and see what would be a route that council's willing to take to maybe start implementing some of these improvements that came out of the stormwater master plan. In this presentation today, we're just going to show how we can break those projects out over 10 years and with different various budgets. In the next council work session, we're going to discuss a little bit of how we can fund each one of those. So right now, our drainage fee assesses about $7 to the residential lot, and we're going to look at those and what we need to do to get, depending on the budget level that council feels comfortable moving forward with, which one will fund that budget level.
Okay.
It did go up as high as maybe looking at doubling the stormwater fee, but that's only one small component of it. There's many other ways to cut that fee down and to look at it. That was just the extreme end, and the low end would be the $7. But that next presentation will show various approaches that we can take to
Okay.
fund this, depending on how you feel comfortable. So with that, I'll let Misty Christian come up here and show the presentation for y'all. Mark, do you have, or who's doing it? Okay, there we go.
Mark?
Good evening, Mayor, Council, City staff. Tonight, like Ray said, my name is Misty Christian. I'm with Kimley Horn and Associates. Tonight, I'd like to give an overview of what we talked about last time. We're wrapping up the Drainage Master Plan. We've had our public meetings, and we have some list of projects. So I'm going to go through that. And then really what we're going to focus on tonight is talk about how to implement those projects.
Okay.
And then the last part, we're going to talk about the next steps, what to expect next, and the overall schedule of the project. So I don't know if y'all remember back in February before COVID, we talked about several different things and had about 10, 15 minutes to go through up-to-date results of the Drainage Master Plan. What we talked about, there was various components. I guess that's okay, the invite and remind. There was various components to the Drainage Master Plan. We had 2 public meetings back in January of the previous year as well as September. We did preliminary designs for the low water crossing.
It's gonna go off in just a second.
Is that okay?
It's gonna go off in just a second.
Okay.
So Mark, what is that on there?
We're inviting Whit to the meeting.
Oh, inviting Whit, okay, very good. Sorry, we'll ignore you for a minute. Okay.
So we had 6 low water crossings. We did the preliminary designs so that they're somewhat shovel-ready, and we prepared construction costs for each one. We looked and evaluated over 125 of the roadway crossings. These crossings are at locations with major creeks regulated by FEMA. Out of those 125 evaluated, there was 9 of them identified as high priority, 17 medium, 22 as lower priority, and 48 of them turned out to be sufficient. They met the 100-year storm event. And then the 29 other, they were consisted of pedestrian bridges or sidewalks. They really weren't exposed to vehicular traffic. In addition, we had a couple of neighborhood studies. We got feedback from the public meeting from various residents that reported localized flooding in their neighborhoods. So out of that, we developed a couple of neighborhood studies: Jim Mitchell, Saddlebrook, Ponderosa, Wagon Wheel, Chisholm, Bandit, and LD Lockett. And then we also prioritized the maintenance activities that needed to be done throughout the city at these crossings. So we also developed budgets, maintenance budgets, for the maintenance side of things that will help Ray and his group. Little Bear Creek was the last component we looked at. We actually had some drones and some on-the-ground survey that looked at the erosion throughout the creek system, made some recommendations for Little Bear Creek. One of those Green Meadow bank stabilization, I don't know if y'all remember that, but that's an area where it's in somebody's backyard and it's starting to erode on one of the bends of the creek. And there's a retaining wall and fences that are being compromised in that area. So we presented on that last time.
Is that behind Terra, the subdivision Terra? Do you know?
Green Meadow is off Green Meadow Lane. I don't believe so.
The one you're talking about is on the property we own between Bedford and 26.
It's in the Saddlebrook neighborhood.
Okay, Saddlebrook, okay.
It's where our property pinches down in size. And so it's where we've talked about dealing with this concern, but more importantly, a trail ultimately from
Right.
26 to Bedford.
That's right. Okay, thank you.
Tell me what to point at.
Yeah.
Okay, so we talked about and developed a lot of projects, and there's a lot of needs in the city with regards to stormwater. So how do we move from just having projects on a list? We want to develop a pretty robust, implementable implementation plan that we're serious about, and we're going to get some of these projects done over the near future. So how do we approach implementation plans? Well, there's a couple of things to consider when we're looking at how to complete the projects. We can look at it from a time frame standpoint. How fast does a city want to get these projects done? Is it more of a 10-year desired planning horizon, or is it more 20 or even longer than that? That's something to consider. One of the big elements is just the available budget. How much do we want to invest in the stormwater and allocate towards meeting the stormwater needs over a specified time period? And then how do we've got a lot of high priority projects, medium, low, neighborhood, how do we really prioritize, and do we want to hit the high priorities first, get those all out of the way, or do we want to do a little bit of all the different buckets as we go along. So think through those three different components of an implementation plan as we kind of present some approaches to consider for implementing these projects. And again, we don't need an answer today. These are just more informational purpose and to get y'all to start thinking about next council meeting, we'll be talking about funding mechanisms. So again, kind of boiling it all down, we've got about 45 projects ranging from high, medium, and low, 6 neighborhood projects. That's over $40 million worth of projects to complete. 6 low water crossings, and just for the low water crossings, there's 21 million is what we identified. And those are all considered high priority. And then we've decided on the maintenance side of things, let's take that out of the CIP plan for now, and we'll handle that separately. So we're not really talking about maintenance at this time, it's just the 45 projects and the low water crossings. So one of the big questions to ask yourself is, do we want to include the $21 million, which is half of all the other projects? Do we really want to put an emphasis on addressing those? Or since we do have preliminary design set aside, do we kind of want to put those aside and wait for maybe grant money? Okay?
Yeah, okay.
There's lots of
How
opportunities.
many of those would be eligible for some kind of grant money?
I think they could all be,
All of them? Okay.
potentially. It's really the appetite of the area, though. I haven't seen a lot of grants come down other than just emergency response through the emergency response folks. But I know Fort Worth, they have several, and they really haven't received a lot of grants. It's usually grants to put early warning signs and devices and systems in place. It's not really to bring it up to a 100-year storm event. So there is a chance that you'll be sitting on the low water crossings. Those are your highest priority projects, and they'll just be sitting there. You'll be addressing lower priority.
Well, aren't we already planning for a grant application for Pool Jackson?
Yeah, we received money for, in cooperation with TxDOT already. Do you want?
No, it's fine, go ahead.
Yeah, the crossing at Jackson
Yeah.
has been funded in conjunction with a TxDOT project that would include raising the profile of the bridge out of the floodplain. And so that was really initiated by us with TxDOT, and so we were able to take advantage of those funds.
So for these others, would those kind of, would that be our approach if we wanted to pursue grants?
Well, we could pursue a lot of different grants. I mean, some of them obviously are more likely than others.
Yeah.
This was TxDOT because of the bridge condition report, but you could easily maybe pursue some of the STP funding through the COG, and as part of a road project, include the bridge. And so those are all elements that you would apply for and just kind of continually pursue them. But they're not very consistent in their funding, and there are various point parameters that are considered, and so we may or may not rank higher or lower on those calls. And I think the STP call is every 3 years or every 5 years, so you kind of have to get caught up in that cycle. We have applied, and we hope to continue to apply, but I think the point is that these are longer-term endeavors.
Yeah, okay. Oh, and another question. So the maintenance that we're excluding right now, is that maintenance on things that we would build, maintenance of these projects after completed, or is it just maintenance of all these areas now?
It's the current conditions as they stand today. So cleaning out
Okay.
culverts, replacing riprap,
Okay.
erosion control. So it's
Okay.
just getting you back up to a more sustainable
Okay.
maintenance.
So so the next phase of discussion is really more about funding at that point. So at that point, we'll throw that back in the mix?
Yes.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, I think last time we said it's going to take you averaging about 300,000 at least a year
Yeah.
just to keep up the
Keep up
maintenance and
maintenance.
cleaning out
Okay.
ditches and culverts and
Yeah.
silt, and it's definitely a full-time job. Okay, so what this slide does, it kind of gives you an idea of the cost range for each project. So from 200 to 300,000, the smaller projects, there's about 22 projects. And then you can see, I'm not going to read all of them,
Yeah.
kind of how each project falls out. And the key to this, if we were to set a funding kind of category, if you will, of only 200 to 300 towards stormwater a year, it would literally take you at least 22 years, because that's the most of them, and then that's just addressing your very, very low priority projects. So we went ahead and put together prioritization plans for each of these categories, and again, this does not include the low water crossings, okay? We'll talk about that separately. The current city budget is $400,000 to $700,000 towards the CIP and stormwater projects today.
Is that an annual
Yeah.
budget?
Yes.
Okay.
So in those categories, we went through and said, well, how many projects can we get done within a 10-year time period? And you can see the number of projects and then also the percentage towards that. So if you had about a $2 million budget, not including the water crossings, you could pretty much complete all of your high, low, and medium priority roadway crossing projects and neighborhood projects.
2 million, did you say?
Yes, so that first line, the 1.9 to 2.25, so average about 2 million, would get you completing all of your non-low water crossing projects. I think there's about 5 projects you'd be short.
Just a clarification, that's 2 million a year for the 10
2
years.
million a year,
Ah.
annual year.
gonna
My
s-
apologies.
Did you get to that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, you're still missing out on your highest priority projects with this approach. But hopefully it gives you an idea. If we were to allocate this much money, this is how many projects, and then that would just roll into another 10 years, 20 years, whatever that time frame that y'all want. Now, if we were to consider the low water crossings, this would allow you to get 5 of the 6 low water crossings complete in the first 10 years, and then the remaining medium and low priority projects over the following 10 years. So this is a 20-year plan with an annual budget of about $2 million. If y'all wanted to be really aggressive and get all the projects done, and we were really talking about 20 years to get everything done. Any questions? I'll pause.
You have a bucket of money?
Well, I mean, to me, it's difficult to decide which ones are the most important because everybody who lives next to these are going to think that's the most important. So, you know, I know we've been talking about those water crossing, I mean, where we have to put the gates down for a long, long time. So how do we even address that?
Well, I think part of this conversation is to point out the complexity of the issues and, of course, the enormity of the cost. If you wanted to produce 2 million a year, you're talking basically $22 a month more on the water bills for stormwater exclusively. And so that's a whole separate conversation we have to have in the future. But I think from this purpose of this presentation is to identify the scope of all of the variety and then to come back with a reasonable plan of action that then tries to incorporate some type of funding. And so I think the message is the low water crossings primarily are going to be funded with, in conjunction with other agencies like TxDOT, and they're going to be grant funded, and they're probably going to be a longer term endeavor. And so why is that important? Because then it switches gears on our approach, and maybe our approach is to upgrade the technology for the early warning of the closure of those crossings, as opposed to, look at ways to raise the road out of the floodplain. Certainly, those are the challenges that are going to be part of the conversation. And at some future meeting, you're going to be asked to share your tolerance as to what kind of increases in those fees would be reasonable for what kind of expectation of improvements we're going to get. And so this is definitely a process. This is just the first step in that effort. And it is much more complex and expensive, I think, than most people realize.
So there are benefits to, of course, having the larger budget. You do complete your higher priority projects, and then your neighborhood improvements, the water crossings. And then one thing to mention, a lot of times, new projects just pop up every year, right? That they weren't really on the radar screen, but we have a flood in a particular area, and we need to address that need. So having somewhat of a little bit larger budget allows you the flexibility to address some of those unforeseen projects that might come up. So that's just lessons learned from my experience. And again, this is something really important. The the CIP, these prioritizations, are gonna have to be updated annually.
Yeah.
With price increases occurring and just the unknowns and, again, the reshuffling of prioritizations throughout the city and just hearing from the public what they need. Okay. So again, the next steps, please consider the information provided tonight. It is definitely just informational tonight, not looking for any direction. The next council meeting update will talk about funding mechanisms. And then at the end of the day, we are ultimately looking for direction on implementation. You know, what's the planning horizon? What is the budget? And then we'll be able to develop that CIP list for whatever that planning horizon is. And we're hoping to get all of that done maybe by the fall of 2020. So as soon as we get
Okay.
some feedback, then hopefully we can wrap up the drainage master plan in the fall. Do you have any questions?
Great.
Not yet.
Any questions? No?
What are you basing the $22 off? How many houses are you?
So, we were just saying, I know Jerry, the city manager pulled that number somewhere just to be thinking about is kind of doubling where we're at. We're somewhere between $14 to $20 is what we were thinking to get to that maximum level of $2 million annual budget to do the CIP project. Well, that's just the extreme. I was just kind of giving you an idea of what you may expect in the next work session, to just kind of be open-minded about that as what you're going to be presented, because to do these projects in a 10-year window is just what we started. If we want to go longer, we can bring those numbers down. But just to give you an idea of where you're going to be looking at, it's based on the current flat rate of whether you live in a 2,000 square feet house or property or a 10,000 square feet property, you're being charged $7 right now.
Yeah.
So the next,
How many households are you guys calculating with?
Oh, our 9,500.
yeah, it's like around
Okay.
10,000. So
I
we're
had
gonna-
9,000, I couldn't remember.
Yeah, it's based on the water meter accounts, which is 10,000.
Okay.
So what we looked at are other ways to be more equitable to those who have bigger impervious areas. So those will be discussed at the next work session too. So those who have more concrete maybe should be looking at paying a little bit higher. So those are different options that we put everything on the table to show you, here are some available mechanisms that we can look into, and that will be explained more on the next council work session.
When you're saying more concrete, you talking about square footages on houses, or are you talking about concrete for industrial?
Square footages on households. So that right now, every residential, no matter what size they are, gets the same
I
flat
like
rate.
that, where it's the same. That's just me.
Okay.
What
so
do,
those-
what do businesses pay?
So that's also something we're gonna be looking at, and I don't have that on the top of my head right now, just looking at the residentials. We're also gonna be looking at them as well to make sure that everybody's paying their fair share, as far whether you're commercial or residential, whether you have a large house or a small house. Everybody's kind of be on the same playing field as far as equitably distributing the drainage fee.
Thank you.
So those are quite a bit of projects. So we started out with the 10-year window for those 40 projects. I mean, we can go however you want to go. Just
Yeah.
wanted to give you some ideas. We're not looking for any direction now. Same thing with the next work session, which is going to be providing you with information again regarding the rate structure and what we can do. Then we plan to come back another work session and kind of start engaging you a little bit more, and hopefully you would have some time to start developing your strategy or your ideas or what you want to, how you want to see this implemented.
And I suspect when we have our annual objective setting session, this will be a topic to talk about.
And Mr. Mayor, one of the things too that may come from this is that we're presenting for you extremes. You know, one extreme is we already have X amount of dollars budgeted, about 300,000 or 400,000 a year for this endeavor. The other extreme is if you wanted to fund everything, which is a doubling and or potentially a tripling of the current monthly charge. But there's a whole lot of pieces in between. And so I just wanted to present those bookends to you because there's ramp-up options. There's also guidelines that we could establish as to what our priorities are and focus on those priorities. And some of the other things we just recognize may or may not get done. So this is just a first conversation. It's not intended to put anyone on the spot. It's more just bringing up the enormity of the issue.
Yeah, getting us the data we need to be thinking about.
So-
Thank you.
We had a year to prepare this. We just
Yep.
want to give you ample time to
Yep.
make the decision as well.
Yeah, very good. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the other thing is the reason that these weren't done before is just what we see ahead of us. It's just a huge, huge investment.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And also it's not, the cost is hugely expensive, but so too is the impact of the changes. You know, if you raise the road profile out of the 100-year floodplain and the profile of that road has to change for 500 or 600 feet on either side of the road,
Yep.
that has impact on surrounding
Yeah.
property owners as well. And so there's a whole lot of other factors that play into that
Yeah.
that have to be considered.
I'd kind of like to see a nice workshop after we do get this all together. And maybe just let people, kind of like what we did with the parks. Hey, what do you think your priorities are? And this is the impact and what have you and stuff like that.
I think that's a good idea.
Orange dots.
Sounds good.
Okay, thank you, Ray. So we're going to move to agenda item number 2, which is discussion of the city's electioneering regulations, our resolution having to do with that.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Christine Levin, City Secretary. This item provides for the discussion and review of our electioneering regulations based on what we had seen during the primary elections in February and Election Day in March. Based on community findings as well as comments from Mayor and Council, I'll review some of these recommendations. The first item that came to light was we actually utilized the library for Election Day, and our regulations specifically only addressed City Hall. Therefore, we recommend changing it to city-owned facilities. This would also help us if there is a time that voting moves to Colleyville Center as an example, just if greater social distancing has to take place and we have to move to a larger place. So this would provide for us to devise a map and have boundaries at any city facility where polling was conducted. That's the first requested change that you see there. Additionally, we would recommend that we clarify the electioneering language and impose regulations for the city-owned facility when it's used as a voting facility, and that we make those changes on the map to make them clear. When, prior to the primaries, we contacted all of the chairs of both parties. We provided the map to them and the regulations, plus we had them downstairs in the lobby, so they had an opportunity to know what to expect prior to coming to electioneer. So we do want to clarify what electioneering is by adding a line under electioneering that says nothing contained herein prevents the wearing of clothing, badges, or political symbols outside the 100-foot marker. Additionally, we would say, and which will be posted at the designated polling location. Electioneering is never permitted in a city-owned parking lot. All electioneering must remain limited to the electioneering location designated on the map. So we had people who were parking vehicles and in the parking lot and electioneering in the parking lot, and we would like to make sure that we shore that up.
The example we had was an individual parked in the parking lot with a big sign attached to the back, so he was taking up a parking space. And so it seemed like we wrote this so that we did not allow that, but if somebody's, walking with a badge or a T-shirt or something, that's okay.
That's correct,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that's why prior to, when we define electioneering,
Yeah,
we'll say that
take that,
you
okay.
could, yes.
Okay.
And
So, Christine, on that, so what would be allowable in the parking lot? Because the example that I had earlier today was somebody pulls up and parks in the parking lot with a Trump bumper sticker.
Right.
That technically would
Yeah.
fall underneath this exclusion, and they couldn't park in the parking lot. So we need to have a little bit more fine-grained discussion on what does and doesn't fall into that.
I think that goes to signage. So you can't have signage on your vehicle and park there other than to come and do your voting. So as far as electioneering, you could not park that vehicle if you were representing whomever that bumper sticker was for any longer than to vote and leave. If you stay in the parking lot, then you're electioneering, and it's within the 100-foot marker, and you can't do that. But we certainly can try and shore that up, but I think
Yeah, I think we need to be a little bit, because somebody could come in and be working correctly in the designated spaces, but they still have that vehicle parked there. In that situation, it would be against the rules.
Well, I think that's just a little too much, if you ask me. If somebody comes in with a bumper sticker that they've had on for,
I'm
you know.
just trying to
years-
think
Oh,
through all of it.
No, I'm not directing this towards you, Chuck.
Yeah.
I'm just directing in general. I think that's a little too much to ask somebody that they have to park way over there because they have a, I mean, that's like telling somebody they can't wear their Texas A&M shirt, okay? And,
It's just good rule.
Yeah,
I mean, well, okay, but, I
that's
mean,
just good manners.
so, I mean, my point, I think that's taken a little too far, if you ask me.
Are you
And-
talking,
and-
oh, go ahead, I'm
Yeah.
so sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Are you talking about within the 100-foot radius, or are you talking
No.
outside?
I'm
Outside.
talking out in the outside parking.
Yeah,
Well,
see, I think outside.
Because we know things have changed so drastically since we are no longer using the front, the back area. I mean, the 100 feet is pretty much the whole parking lot back there, isn't it?
No, it's
Up to the
not.
sidewalk back there, is it
No.
not?
No, it's
It's up to it, but I think the issue, what we observed last time is somebody parking in there's not a lot of parking close to vote. And so an individual parked in the back parking lot, had an SUV or some kind of car, raised the back end, put a 4x8 sign there, and so he took up the parking space. So the problem was, he was taking up a parking space that was needed for people to come in and out. So maybe it has to do with what parking lot we're talking about. Maybe we restrict one, but the big one out here, I don't think it matters.
Right.
Yes,
Yeah.
I
That's-
believe
That's
that,
what I'm talking
I
about.
believe
that
that when
makes
you
more
see
sense.
the map, that perhaps this will clarify.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can go forward.
You know
a
we
minute
like to jump ahead.
And then come back.
We always do.
No?
Yeah, the map would clarify.
You gotta just
that.
start pushing buttons.
Yeah,
All right,
Yeah.
let's see if I can do that.
Cover that, cover that, cover
I
that.
thought that was our job.
there you,
Okay.
yeah,
So if you will look at this map, you will see that the green area designates the signage. The red, where you can put signs. The red, you cannot electioneer. So as you see on this map, we're saying within the parking lot, you cannot be in the parking lot electioneering. However, you can have signage and be electioneering in the green space and the sidewalk, as long as you don't impede the sidewalk.
yeah.
And the parking
So
lot. too.
when we are defining political signage and counting for your 22x2 signs, that you can't have that in the parking lot. You cannot be in a vehicle in the back parking lot.
Right.
Yeah, in the
You'll see
back.
the large area, the south
Right.
area, signage is allowed, just
Right.
not in the landscape
Right.
or tree wells.
Right. So it's specific parking lots, like, yeah, and
Yeah.
that's, as the map so
Yeah,
designates.
I'm good
yeah.
with that. That
But-
makes sense.
Well, the
Yeah.
one in the back's really the only one that people will use, I mean, because nobody
Oh.
is, I guess a few people park in the front right there, but.
Yeah.
But there's nobody usually out there now. The last time it didn't seem that way. People were in the back, and
Yeah,
they can't really talk to people anyway. It's gotten, I mean,
Yeah.
the way is unless the people park over in the far parking lot over there,
yeah.
Right.
the south,
So-
is that south?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
so we still want to preclude, like if somebody's pulling up and they're gonna vote, and they're parking up in this back lot to vote, and they have stickers on their car that they've had on there, you don't, like you said, the example you said, I don't think we want to preclude them from parking there
Right,
to vote.
Vote,
right.
So that becomes a time-critical type activity.
right.
And I believe that's not electioneering, that is
Parking and voting.
Yeah, okay, so,
parking
yeah,
and voting.
okay.
Yeah.
But if somebody
Yeah.
pops out a 4x8 sheet, they should be down in that south parking lot. I totally,
Correct.
Yes,
totally agree.
right.
Are we going to make sure that wording's in there so there's not a problem there?
Be on that map, I'm sure the map will.
We will do that. We'll clarify.
Thank you, Christine.
Currently, we're suggesting that we put designated by the map. So I believe
Yeah.
that all of the clarification would come
Takes
from
care of itself.
the map. But certainly, any recommendations
Yeah. Yeah.
we will take care of.
Thank you.
The next changes would be under the regulations for political signs, tents, and canopies. Under item 2 for the political signs, we recommend adding that the signage, canopies, and tents are secured with weights but may not be staked in the ground. And the proposal is to add, or attached to a vehicle and parked in a city-owned facility parking lot unless designated as an electioneering location, which that south parking lot would be in this case. Also under item 5, which is political signs, to add the language, shall not be permitted in any form on any city-owned facility parking lot unless designated as an electioneering location. So it all comes back to the map. And it does go on to say designated on a map and placed at the polling location. And again, this is just in case we move from City Hall to the library, we will have a map for each of those 100 feet markers and where that's allowed.
Can-
And under, oh, I'm sorry,
No.
go ahead.
May I ask why we're not allowed to stake the tents into the ground? Because there's a lot of times whenever you can't pick up those weights for the tents.
Because we have irrigation lines out there.
Yeah, it's kind of the same risk as if we're putting the signs up, I guess. But I understand what you're saying.
So would they have to be weighted? Is that what we're
Yeah,
saying?
you'll have to get HADOC blocks, or they sell like a weight, but you got to find them. It goes around the leg.
Now, I will say during the last election, one of the things that I saw was staking with the same stakes that are used for the political signs, and that seemed to be a decent compromise between the two,
Yeah, you're talking about the wire frame.
with the wire frame.
Yeah, because those don't really do. Okay, thank you.
Christine, I noticed from the last resolution to this one, the distance between the canopies or tents went from 50 feet to 20 feet. Is that 20 feet between each of the tents, or can one candidate have two tents next to each other, or do those two tents need to be 20 feet apart?
If our resolution says 50, I believe there must be a typographical error there, because I believe
It was
that
50 before.
okay, I believe that through all of our discussion, we had settled on 20 feet between canopies.
But-
50 feet if
Okay.
it was for the same measure, for the same candidate or measure.
Right, so you're saying 20 feet?
Okay, so you can't have two next to each other, is what you're saying, if you're the same for one candidate.
Right, correct. But you can have two candidates 20 feet apart,
Okay.
just not the same measure or candidate within 50 feet of one another.
Understood.
Yeah. Christine, when we get to the end of this,
Yes.
I'd like to talk about potentially having some kind of drawing numbers or drawing straws to determine tent locations, because that's been a historic mess,
That's relative.
and I'd like to see it evened up some way.
I believe it's our next slide, Councilmember Dotson. That and another request from a citizen is also on that. So finally, we would say under the canopies and tents, that they not be located on a parking lot, landscaped island, or sidewalk. And then finally, so this is our current map that indicates where the electioneering is allowed and includes signage in the south parking lot. The recommendations, if these are accepted, this would be the revised map with some of the language that says the signage cannot be placed in the landscape parking lot, parking areas, in the landscape medians or the tree medians. And then it will provide for placing signs. It does have to count toward the 20 that you can have out in that greenscape between the back of the parking lot and the front of the sidewalk. And then finally, we have had two requests, one from Councilmember Dotson who does want to discuss the possibility of a lottery for the tents. And I believe we had that discussion at the last meeting, and we wanted to see how it went. And then Natalie Jenko had also requested that tents be allowed in the area behind the sidewalk. If we did that in the two areas that she was indicating, to maintain the 20 feet between, 2 tents could be placed there. If you allowed it along the entire greenscape from behind the sidewalk to the fence along City Park, we measured that, and that's 280 feet, which would provide for 10 tents to be placed all along that.
So I thought I thought the rule was 20 feet separation for the same candidate.
Right.
Yes.
So there can be tents adjacent, just a different party or different candidate, right?
Right, so this is thinking you could have 10 tents, the first one being for A, the
Yeah.
second one being for B,
Yeah.
that next one C, and then you can do A, B, C again, if that's what you.
No, but I'm talking
so
about the
choose.
80, I'm questioning the math, because that's assuming
28.
you can have tents adjacent, they just can't be the same people, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so you said in 80 feet you could only have 2 tents, but it'd be like 8 tents, wouldn't it?
No, because you have to have 20 feet still between the tents. So
No.
if a tent is 10 by 10, and you have to have 20 feet,
No,
my
no, I'm
math was
saying,
that I
no.
divided by 30 feet, and
Well, but is that the right interpretation? I'm confused, because you have a 10-foot tent, and the same candidate party has to be down 20,
right.
but I thought other,
No, the same candidate had to be down 50. The next candidate has to be down 20.
okay.
And see, I was almost thinking they could be back to back as long as the same candidate wasn't.
Yeah, that's.
If I
that was
set
my
up and then Chuck set
interpretation.
one up and then somebody else set one up, it would be within 30 feet of 3 tents right there. But I couldn't set another one up for 50 feet, if that makes sense.
Right, okay.
Because if we do a tent and then we go 20 feet, that could land you on a sidewalk or,
Well, isn't this the baseball field that it's right next to?
Yeah.
That's
So, I
correct.
mean, I could see that being very distracting for the players.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
let's.
But yeah, so
remember.
my view on that is I'm not for it. But one, it's park property. We've always taken that position as park property, and so you can't do it on park property. Two, the space, as you point out, you have limited space for tents. And so, to me, I'm really paying a lot of attention to equity, because whoever got back there would be advantageous for those people, because everybody else is gonna be out in this acre.
Yeah.
And so that's why I've been opposed to, there's a strip of ground that little signs could go on between the sidewalk and the parking lot, not in the median, that's okay, little signs, but you couldn't have big sign, you can't have, because all the big signs have to be over here anyway, but you can't have canopies. I just don't think it's a good idea to do it, put it there personally.
Actually,
Yeah, I agree with that, Richard.
Okay, city manager?
Just a comment, Mayor. On the conversation about the tents, because Councilman Rigney pointed out the 50-foot was in the regulations last time, and now it's the 20 feet.
Okay.
I do believe the way it's worded, it's intended to be as you've mentioned, and that is tents can be next to each other. However, there must be a minimum of 20 feet distance between similar measures or candidates. And so if you have multiple people representing a measure or a candidate,
Right.
they can have multiple tents, but they have a minimum of 20 feet.
feet, right.
Previously, it was 50 feet. And so if we want to make sure we clarify that, that's okay as well, because the language as it's written could be interpreted to mean, or perceived to mean, 20 feet between tents. And
Yeah.
that obviously is a different dynamic altogether.
Yeah,
here's how I perceived it, that we had explained it, was that you go back to back, just like you're saying, but your candidate, if I'm running, my other tent couldn't be within 50 feet of.
50 feet, right.
And I think that's fair to be
Yeah.
50 feet, because if you have 3 other candidates, who's to say I plant one comes
Right.
up and then I don't skip?
Right.
have
Right.
two side by side.
Yeah.
That was the whole meaning for having
Yeah.
50 feet between us, so that at
Yeah.
least it gives 4 other candidates a chance at a 10 by 10 tent.
Yeah.
And I see this 280 feet at 10 tents, but really and truly, isn't that 28 tents?
Yeah.
So, I'm not, it doesn't bother me that they're back there, but you got it, hey, I'm just one person on that. I think when it's hot, unless we're doing the lottery, if we do the lotto system, I have no problem with that not being there, but if it's first come, first served, where people are out there camping out and barbecuing for a spot 2 days before, I think we've got a problem.
Well, that's why, another reason, I think if they're all out in a 1 acre, camp out there all you want to. I mean, no matter where you're at out there, I don't think you have an advantage one way or the other.
I totally agree. No, I totally agree with that. The lottery for positioning, I'm not a fan of that personally, but I think if everyone's in one area that's equal, that we're fine.
You gotta
personally.
remember, there's a crosswalk in there, number one. And number two, there was a fight for positioning and where a tent could be because it was on a corner and then there wasn't enough space. So it pulled this one back and pushed this one forward, and this person got to talk before these people could. So, I'm in favor of it.
Yeah,
I'm in favor of
I
lottery
think-
also, because I think
I
it's,
just,
George, go ahead.
go ahead, George.
yeah, I just think that we've seen people camp out at midnight, do things that were against the rules, and still got spaces before. And I just don't like that happening. I would rather see a true lottery, give everybody equal chance, and then there can be no griping about spaces and stuff. And now it looks like almost everybody's coming in the back of City Hall. And if that's the case, then there's really only good places, or best places in the northwest corner of that acre.
Right.
Yeah. You have to remember too, that it's a new world that we have little experience in. There's going to be not just city candidates, not just county candidates, there's going to be many, many, many candidates can be voted for at every location. So
Right.
you're going to have people coming in, running obscure campaigns, entering the lottery, and that's really will make a difference. And plus, the ones that are actually in town or local that you would typically tend to see, whether it be school board or city or whatever, they're going to be scattered out all over that 1 acre, well apart from one another. So I'm just throwing out things that will happen depending on
Yep.
the consequences of different things that are done.
Okay.
Like Councilman Dodson said, there's a problem that there's people that will bend the rules, and I'm not knocking on us, but we really aren't really good at enforcing those rules
Yeah.
until somebody's complained, and then by then it's too late. It's already a couple hours in, it was happening at midnight or happened at 2 o'clock, people moving other people's stuff. But, I mean, if there's a way that we could have I hate to say it like this, but by golly, if it comes down to it, a starting line, and you can't cross, once those barricades are out of the way, it's free for all, It's just gotten to that point where people will break the rule for that position.
That's why I tend to lean more towards the lottery concept, because then we're not all having a gold rush at the beginning of the campaign activity.
This
Everybody
company, it
knows
gets me nowhere.
I'm gonna be here. Yeah,
So-
so being there at 12:01 is not gonna get me a better spot.
I'll say, so postulate this, say you have 100 candidates from all over the place that's going to be on that ballot.
Yeah.
Every one of them puts in for the lottery. Only 12 of them actually show up.
Yeah.
And so you got tents, who knows what, it's all over, be in one corner, another corner, and most of the property's not being used. So that can happen, just FYI. Yeah, Jerry.
Mayor, the best example is the individual who brought forth the initiative for legalizing marijuana a couple years back and was putting signs up. You could have somebody trying to get a ballot measure or something like that who would argue on behalf of as a policy or a directive or a referendum item that has nothing to do with the city, and that's why the lottery is dangerous. So if you're going to do the lottery, you got to be very careful in how you
Well,
structure
a lot of these candidates will have nothing to do with the city. I mean, judges,
Oh.
many, many, many candidates.
Right now, there's
Yeah.
nothing to stop them from coming in now at 12:01.
Yeah,
So
true.
my thought is, if we do the lottery
Yeah.
at 7:30 the morning of, and you get of an 8 o'clock
Oh,
polling time, then you got a half an hour, go
Yeah.
get your tent up. If you're not there for the lottery at that time, you don't get a tent.
What if
Sorry.
what if we just changed the time when people could set up their stuff so that before the time is 8
I think
AM or
we've seen-
whatever, before it's 8 AM or whatever time it is, that land is cleared? Like, maybe
They
we
don't-
have the police come by and clear that land, everyone off till 8 AM, or, I mean,
That'll
maybe
take-
midnight's just not the appropriate.
yeah.
That'll take
hour.
Kai Roby standing out there and making sure, and then
Yeah.
if anybody's, I say Kai, whoever's appointed, to make sure that there's nothing put out there, because it will happen, I
No, I
promise.
agree, it'd have to be cleared.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm not
Yeah.
grabbing at you.
Yeah, there's no perfect solutions. That is a
There is
good
a-
recommendation.
There is a difference, there is currently a difference because we are not moving locations for an election. So
Yeah.
these new regulations have allowed you to stay there through election day.
Yeah.
So
Right.
it's not that you have to go vie again for election day because that's also conducted
Yeah.
at the early
Is that
voting
true?
location.
Yeah, so whatever you get, you live with it through the election day.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's why I think a lottery early that morning, if you're committed enough to your candidate or measure, you're gonna show up, you're gonna put yourself in the lottery, and you're gonna put your tent out.
Okay,
Oh,
so one of the,
I've got you. So you're saying you have to be there that morning in
Yes.
order to,
Your name doesn't go
Draw
in
straw.
until that morning.
7 a.m. draw.
so
Yeah,
what
and-
happens, so let's think through this. So a couple of things come to mind. One, okay, so people don't show up that morning. They show up that afternoon or the next day or decide, hey, I've decided I want something at Colleyville. Are you saying you'd completely preclude them?
No, if
No, they
there's
just go
open
to the back.
space, then there's
go
open
to the back.
space.
There's
And then
open
they
space.
choose whatever's open.
Yeah,
It's open space after that drawing.
Okay, the other thing, in the drawing, then the results of the drawing have to comply with these regulations. So there's spacing requirements that, hey, me
Sure.
and Bobby may get one side by side, but we can't, that can't happen. Somebody's got to move. How does that, who adjudicates that?
why can't you and Bobby be next to each
Because
other?
our regulations say, you know,
If they're sharing if they're co-promoting each other.
For the same measure.
So you're saying if they're on the same slate? Is that
well, I
what you're
take
talking
that
about?
back. Me and Bobby could.
Well, why
be.
couldn't they? I
You
don't
could.
understand that.
Exactly.
Yeah,
it's
we
only
could.
one measure, and
Yeah.
that can easily be resolved by
But,
putting the
Yeah.
name back in and drawing another one.
But wait a minute, let me
Sounds
go
like a
back. I'm
very
confused now.
complicated solution for not really that big of a problem.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
Well,
that's my perspective.
yeah.
Why can't you and Bobby be next to each other?
No, we could.
Okay.
Me and Bobby
that's-
could. But there are spacing requirements in there. Like I want 2 tents. I want 3 tents. I want 3 tents.
I say,
I'm gonna put myself in 3 times.
okay,
So the result of that drawing has to, I can't have one within 20 feet or 50 feet or whatever it is, right?
I think we limited it to 2 per candidate. 2 tents.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe we
Yeah.
did.
I believe you're right. I believe you're right.
and I think that as the
Yeah.
8 o'clock, the 7 o'clock, and I'm just hypothetically saying this, if there was a 7 o'clock draw, everybody goes through, draws the 1 through 10 or 1 through 50 or whatever, and as you get yours put out, whenever that's through, you come back and draw again for another spot, or I guess if you're wanting
Oh,
2
yeah.
tents.
Yeah, I think that's relatively easy to do.
Okay.
But how many people actually use 2 tents? I mean, they always hold 2 or 3 spots and they never use 2 tents.
Well, I
And
don't know.
And you know, that's why we're doing this, because you're right. People were putting 3 or 4 tents out, and then some were putting out Taj Mahals,
Yeah.
20 by 40s, and then they were putting their buddies 20 by 40. And before you knew it, the next candidate was 60 feet down the end of the, park down here.
Okay, so
That's
let me say this. This is true. So we're iterating because we've been through this one campaign. We learned about the parking lot, so we're changing. And so this isn't in stone. I mean, we can make changes. We can try something. If it doesn't work, we can try something else.
Exactly.
George is so happy he left the room.
All right, so, okay, so let me ask this question because she needs a little direction here. I've heard Tammy say, I'm okay with lotteries. I've heard Kathy say I'm not. Heard George say I'm good with it. Bobby, I think.
I'm good with
we're-
the draw,
Chuck was
Good.
good.
7 a.m. draw.
Callie, you haven't said, but I've already hit a majority, even though I would say no, but even
Say,
if you
I'm
said.
good with it. Yeah.
Even if you say no, So,
No, I said I'm good with it.
Okay,
But
you're
it
good with it.
didn't really matter. There's
Okay.
plenty.
all right, so now, so the majority here would vote for a lottery, but now it becomes real important how that lottery is implemented. So you better put your noodling brains on and
We can
think
do
through
that.
this before you
We'll
vote.
come back.
Whit, Mr. City Attorney, have you heard this conversation, and would you be able to provide any direction on the city secretary conducting the lottery for all elections, not just because City Hall will be used for primaries as well as the city elections? Do you have some direction?
Well, it's fine to do the lottery, and I think the key will be coming up with a system that doesn't burden your office, but that provides, an easy and easy to access, easy to use, and obviously very fair system. But yeah, we can come up with that if that's what you're asking.
Yes, that is. Thank you. Do you have any experience with that, or? I guess I'm asking
No,
how soon I'll be able
I
to
have
bring
not
something
personally.
before the council.
Yeah, put
Yeah,
20
I'll
members
I'll
in the
bring
have to work
pick
with you.
'em
We'll
out.
figure it out.
Okay,
So a couple of weeks, and I can bring back a
Yeah.
proposal
Okay.
for that. And
Yeah, one of my suggestions would be that the secretary could name a committee and to do it. So that, because that's a very difficult time for her at that time.
Correct.
Yeah.
And additionally, what is the outcome on the tents being allowed in the green space behind the sidewalk
no.
to the fence?
yeah,
No,
I'm a yes.
I mean,
there, yes.
I'm a yes.
y'all got us this time.
I
wait,
say no.
Callie.
Wait, what'd you say,
I
Kelly?
say no, sorry. I say no. I think
Okay,
it's
no,
Okay.
no.
not a safe situation.
Okay, we split it.
Yep, that's fine.
What about George? Oh, you mean we won one, we lost one?
Yeah.
That's how it
Thank you.
goes. That's how it
Okay,
goes.
Okay. Any other questions or direction?
no, I'm good. Any other questions?
Thank you for
Thank you.
entertaining this.
Thank you.
Really
Appreciate it.
Good job.
Okay, the last item, of course, is our standing regular agenda items, and tonight, we do have the privilege of 2 oaths of office, and George has already recorded his, so we'll see that by video, and Kathy will do it like we normally do it, right here. And then, of course, it's different, we elect a mayor pro tem immediately after that by charter. And then, typical announcements. I'm gonna do a quick kind of COVID status, and then we'll have our regular announcements after that. I think you guys all have that information. Then the consent resolution, we're gonna have a monthly financial report. We have some table items. The blue bonnet items are gonna remain on the table. We're still waiting for information. One was withdrawn by the applicant, 8C, so we don't have to deal with that one. And the rest are 9 or 2 new resolutions, and then there's a table resolution on the Shelton Drive that we're gonna pull off.
Yes, sir.
So we will pull 10A off the table and deal with that. Okay, I think that's it. Any other comments or questions before I close? Okay, I'm gonna close the work session, and then we're gonna move into executive session in accordance with the Texas Government Code, Chapter 551, Subchapter D, Section 551.071 legal, Section 551.072 real estate, Section 551.074 personnel, and Section 551.087 economic development. So we're now in executive session, and we will move to the, we're moving to the conference room.